Yeah.
It says here there are more obese Americans than a decade ago, not fewer. We eat more salt and fat, not less. So there you go. More of us have high blood pressure. More of our children have untreated tooth decay.
Hmm.
So the whole mantra of not eating fat is coupled with the mantra that you should eat complex carbohydrates. And if you eat a lot of complex carbs, I mean, studies show that if you add the fat in, it's adding insult to injury.
Yeah.
So it takes a little bit to tease out the truth in this stuff, and it seems like, articles like this continue the myths in the culture about what's good to eat, what's not to eat, and what's responsible for the obesity.
Yeah. And then, of course, in this article, they point out all these statistics, and obviously some of them are kind of misleading.
We need to strike a balance, setting targets that are achievable.
Yeah.
Dr. Howard Koh, federal health official who oversees the Healthy People Project. Well, that's quite a project. Healthy people.
Yeah.
We need to strike a balance of setting targets that are achievable and also ask the country to reach. That's a balance that's sometimes a challenge to strike, he says. Well, I guess when you're a central planner, yeah, it is kind of difficult to issue your commandments from on high and expect people to follow them, right?
Yeah. And again, I think we were talking about this a little before the show, but people kind of look up to all these authorities as if they have the gospel truth in all this. And it's unfortunate that even now there's still these articles, they quote government officials as being experts in the field of nutrition,
Mm-hmm.
when that couldn't be further from the truth. And a lot of these government officials, they're not going to have our, yours and my best interests in mind here. And a lot of it is they're going to be bought out, and
They're going to have their own agendas, right?
yeah, they're going to have their own agendas. And that goes back to, we were talking about the knowledge. I talked about the knowledge. The other side of it is the healthy mind. So the psychology aspect of it, which is really a big focus in our book as well.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to weed through all this, I mean, you got to have a strong psychology and high self-esteem.
Yes, focus on those very important values of your own self, how you relate to yourself and your self evolution in terms of how you're thinking about things and challenging the statements around you and trying to verify what is true and what is false rather than just accept what the authorities say.
Yeah, and usually whatever the mainstream is doing is typically the wrong way, as we've mentioned before in several podcasts, I think.
Yeah, sure. And that kind of relates to an interview we might have coming up in a couple weeks for you with Tom Naughton from Fathead the Movie.
Yeah.
It's a documentary that challenges a lot of the sacred cows in the nutrition industry and big agriculture and so forth.
Yeah, and you can get that at Netflix. I just actually ordered it, so we're going to actually watch it next week before we talk to Tom. And it should be an entertaining movie with some glaring truths to it as well.
Indeed. Waking us up about this whole history of how it has gone so terribly wrong and how the health officials have led people astray time and time again for their own agendas. So I'm sure they have good intentions, right?
Oh, of course.
But it's important to stick to the facts and look at things objectively, taking into account all of the evidence, rather than trying to just cherry pick things and then trying to foist beliefs on other people and make them obey things. And we see that with the banning of trans fats and all the other nanny state tactics that happen when people don't believe that others have responsibility, that they can't make their own choices, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. The nanny state, and that's just the government jumping out ahead of the trends. So, yeah, it's definitely good to do the research yourself and keep listening to our podcast, and we'll be giving you the goods.
Absolutely. So if you want to know more about it, just go to healthymindfitbody.com and you can subscribe through iTunes there too. And I'll have a link to that in the show notes as well. So,
Yeah, and if you like this show, give us a rating and review on iTunes, and that would be greatly appreciated.
and of course, feel free to send in your comments about the shows. After the show notes, there's a comment section too, which we covered on the last podcast with Angie's questions about, how to deal with those in your midst that are wanting you to eat in not so healthy ways. So,
Right.
hope everyone had a great New Year's and having a great Festivus or any other sort of celebration that you're inclined to. And we'll talk to you next week.
Talk to you next week. Happy New Year.
Joyous Novel Annum. And make sure to have lots of hot, passionate sex.
Oh, yeah.
While you're eating sweets, talking on your cell phone.
Perfect.
It's